Isaac is walking up a mountain. The wood is on his back. The fire is in his father's hand. And the boy, who does not yet know what the wood is for, asks the question that has been hanging in the air for 3 days. Father, we have the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb? And Abraham answers with a sentence he cannot see yet. God will provide himself the lamb. He says it before he can see it. Then the altar is built. The wood is laid in order. The boy is bound, and the knife goes up, and at the last second, the angel stops it and says the most puzzling sentence in the entire Bible. Genesis chapter 22, verse 12. Now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. Now I know. If you have ever read those 3 words and felt the floor shift under you, you are not alone, because they raise the question that sits in the back of every honest believer's mind. If God already knows everything, if He can see the heart from the inside out, if He knows your thoughts before you think them, your failures before you commit them, your faith before you live it, then why does He test us? Why put us through the fire when He already knows the answer? It sounds pointless. It sounds cruel. It sounds like a God playing games with people He claims to love. And here's the strange part. The question is not modern. It is not something skeptics invented to embarrass believers. The Bible itself raises it. And if you have ever stumbled on that verse and wondered if it means God is smaller than you thought, this is for you, because we are going to walk through what the Bible actually says about testing, why God does it, what He is after, and what it means for the season you are in right now. Let us start at the beginning. The first time the Bible records God testing a person, it is not a small thing. It is not a pop quiz. It is the worst possible scenario. Genesis chapter 22, verse 1. It happened after these things, that God tested Abraham, and said to him, Abraham, He said, Here I am. Think about who Abraham is at this point. He is not a young man with his whole life ahead of him. He is old. He has spent decades following a God who promised him things he could not see. He left his homeland when God told him to, not knowing where he was going. He waited for a son through years of silence, through the slow death of his own hopes, through the painful reality that his own body was past the age of promise. And then, when it was impossible, when Sarah was old and the world would have laughed, God gave him Isaac. Isaac was the miracle, the laughter, the fulfillment of everything God had sworn to Abraham, the child of the promise. And now, verse 2, He said, Now take your son, your only son, whom you love, even Isaac, and go into the land of Moriah. Offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains, which I will tell you of. Read that again, slowly. Your son, your only son, whom you love. The test is not abstract. It is specific. It names the thing Abraham loves most in the world and asks for it. And here's the detail that should stop you cold. The text tells us Abraham rose early the next morning. He did not argue. He did not negotiate. He did not tell Sarah. He did not try to reason God out of it. He cut the wood, saddled the donkey, took 2 servants and his son, and started walking. 3 days. Sit with that for a moment. 3 days of walking with that command burning in his chest. 3 days of watching Isaac carry the wood on his back and wondering if the boy understood what the wood was for. 3 days to change his mind, to turn around, to decide the whole thing was a mistake, to conclude that the voice on the mountain could not have been God. He did not. He kept walking, and when Isaac asked him, Father, we have the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for the offering? For the offering, Abraham answered with a sentence that has echoed through every generation since. God will provide Himself the lamb. He said it before he could see it. That is faith. That is what the test was drawing out of him. And when they reached the mountain, Abraham built the altar, laid the wood in order, bound his son, and raised the knife. Genesis chapter 22, verse 10. Abraham stretched out his hand and took the knife to kill his son. And then, at the last second, the angel calls out. Verse 11. Yahweh's angel called to him out of the sky and said, Abraham, Abraham. He said, Here I am. And verse 12. He said, Don't lay your hand on the boy or do anything to him. For now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. Stop. Read that again. Now I know. Not I always knew. Now I know. It is the most puzzling sentence in the entire story. Because the whole point of our question is that God already knows everything, and here he is, standing on a mountain, saying that a test just taught him something. What does that mean? Does God learn? Did Abraham's obedience add a new fact to the mind of the one who sees all things? That cannot be right. And yet there it is, in the text, in the mouth of the angel. And if you have ever read that verse and felt the floor shift under you, you are not alone. You are not the first person to stumble on it, and you are not the first person to wonder if the whole thing means God is smaller than you thought. And here is something most people never realize. This is not the only place the Bible talks like this. The pattern is everywhere. God tests Israel in the wilderness, and the text says he did it to know what was in their heart. He leaves Hezekiah alone with the ambassadors from Babylon, and the text says he did it to know all that was in his heart. Over and over, Scripture describes testing as a way of finding something out. And if you read those verses the way you would read a modern sentence, you walk away with a God who needs to run an experiment to see what is really inside you. A God who is surprised by the results. A God who is, frankly, smaller than the God you have been taught to worship. Consider Hezekiah for a moment, because his story is the quietest test in the whole Bible. He was one of the most faithful kings Judah ever had. He trusted God against the Assyrian army when the whole world said it was hopeless, and God delivered him. And then the ambassadors came from Babylon, curious about the miracle that had happened in his land. They walked through his gates, past his storehouses, and Hezekiah showed them everything. Every treasure, every shield, every room full of gold. 2 Chronicles chapter 32, verse 31. However, concerning the ambassadors of the princes of Babylon, who sent to him to inquire of the wonder that was done in the land, God left him, to test him, that he might know all that was in his heart. God left him. That is the test. Not a command, not a trial by fire. Just being left alone with an opportunity to show off. And Hezekiah opened every door. The test exposed what was in his heart, and God already knew it was there. But Hezekiah did not, and the nation did not. The test made it visible, but the Bible is not confused. And the answer to this is hiding in the words themselves, because the Hebrew language, the language these stories were written in, uses words that carry more weight than their English translations can hold. And when you slow down and look at what those words actually mean, the whole thing turns. So let us look at the first word, the word for test. The Hebrew word is Nasah. It shows up in Genesis chapter 22, verse 1, the verse where God tests Abraham. And here is what Nasah does not mean. It does not mean to find out. It means to try, to prove, to put something through its paces and see what it is made of. It is the word you would use for testing metal to see if it is genuine, for proving a weapon before you trust it, for examining a coin to make sure it is not counterfeit. The same word family appears when Moses tells Israel at Sinai. Exodus chapter 20, verse 20. Don't be afraid, for God has come to test you, and that his fear may be before you, that you won't sin. God came to test them, not to learn about them, to prove something to them, to set his fear before their eyes. And here is the detail that changes everything. When the Bible wants to talk about God discovering new information, it uses different words. But when it talks about testing, it keeps reaching for this one. Nasah. To prove, to refine, to demonstrate what is already there. Not to learn the answer, to display it. Think about that for a second. The test is not for God's information. It is for the demonstration of what is true. Abraham's obedience did not teach God something he did not know. It proved something that was already real. It made the invisible visible. It turned Abraham's faith from something private into something public, something the angels could see, something the boy on the altar could see, something Abraham himself could see. The test did not create the faith. It revealed it. It proved it. It displayed it in the open air of a mountain. But then we run into the second word, the one that seems to give the whole thing away. Because the text does not just say God tested Abraham. It says God tested him to know. And that word know is where the real surprise is hiding. The Hebrew word for know is yada, and in English we read it as information. to know a fact, to know a date, to know that 2 plus 2 equals 4. But in Hebrew, yada does not work that way. Yada is the word the Bible uses when it says Adam knew his wife. Genesis chapter 4, verse 1. The man knew Eve his wife. She conceived. That is, not information. That is, intimacy. That is, experience. That is the deepest kind of knowing there is. It is the word God uses when he says to Israel, Amos chapter 3, verse 2, "You only have I known of all the families of the earth." God is not saying he had heard a rumor about Israel. He is saying he entered into covenant with them. He bound himself to them. He knew them, the way a husband knows a wife, the way a father knows a child, the way a shepherd knows each sheep by name. So when the text says God tested Abraham to know, it is not saying God ran an experiment to gather data. It is saying something far deeper. The test was the place where knowledge became experience, where trust stopped being a belief Abraham held and became a life Abraham lived, where the relationship between God and his servant was proven, deepened, and displayed in the open air of a mountain. God did not learn who Abraham was. Abraham learned who Abraham was. And the world learned what faith looks like when everything is on the line. And that changes the entire question. Because now the question is not, why does an all-knowing God test us? The question becomes, what is the test actually doing? And the Bible has a lot to say about that. But before we get there, we have to draw a line that most people never draw. Because there are two different things in Scripture that get called the same thing in English. And confusing them has caused more damage than almost anything else. The New Testament uses a Greek word, pirazo, that can mean either to test or to tempt. And the Bible is very careful to keep those two things separate. James chapter 1, verse 13. Let no man say when he is tempted, I am tempted by God, for God can't be tempted with evil, and he himself tempts no one. Read that again. God tempts no one. God does not dangle bait in front of you, hoping you will bite so he can watch you fall. That is not what testing is. That is temptation, and temptation has a different source. James says temptation comes from our own desires, from the enemy, from the world. But testing, the kind of testing that refines and proves, that is something God uses for a different purpose entirely. The same fire that the enemy uses to destroy, God uses to purify. The same pressure that the world uses to break you, God uses to strengthen you. The test is not the temptation. And the temptation is not the test. They look alike from the outside. They feel alike from the inside. They can even happen at the same time, but they are not the same thing. And knowing the difference changes how you pray in the middle of it. And here is where the Bible's favorite image comes in. Because Scripture does not describe testing as a courtroom. It describes it as a furnace. 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 7. That the proof of your faith, which is more precious than gold that perishes even though it is tested by fire, may be found to result in praise, glory, and honor at the revelation of Jesus Christ. Gold tested by fire. That is the image. And think about what a refiner actually does. He does not throw gold into the fire to destroy it. He throws it in to purify it. The fire burns away everything that is not gold. The dross rises to the surface, gets skimmed off, and what remains is more valuable than what went in. The refiner sits and watches the metal, because if he leaves it too long, it is ruined. He knows the exact moment it is done by looking at his own reflection in the surface of the metal. That is the picture the Bible keeps painting. Zechariah chapter 13, verse 9. I will bring the third part into the fire, and will refine them as silver is refined, and will test them like gold is tested. Malachi chapter 3, verse 3. And he will sit as a refiner and purifier of silver. Psalm 66, verse 10. For you, God, have tested us. You have refined us as silver is refined, not destroyed, refined. The fire is not the point. What comes out of the fire is the point, and the refiner is not standing at a distance hoping it works. He is sitting over the metal, watching, present, in control of the heat. He set the temperature. He knows the timing. He is not surprised by the process. He is the one running it. And that brings us to the longest test in the Bible. The one that lasted 40 years. And if you have ever felt like your season has gone on too long, If you have ever wondered why God is taking so long, this is the part for you. After God brought Israel out of Egypt, He led them into the wilderness. And the text is honest about why. Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 2. You shall remember all the way which Yahweh your God has led you these 40 years in the wilderness, that He might humble you, to test you, to know what was in your heart, whether you would keep His commandments or not. 40 years. An entire generation. And here's what the text says the test was for: to humble them, to test them, to know what was in their heart. And if you read that the way we have been reading it, you might think, so God did not know what was in their heart, and He needed 40 years to find out. But we already know the word. Yada. The test was not for God's information, it was for their formation. Because look at what happened inside those 40 years. Every morning manna appeared on the ground with the dew. Bread from heaven, enough for the day. No more and no less. If they gathered too much, it spoiled. If they tried to store it for tomorrow, it bred worms. They had to trust God one day at a time, every single morning for 40 years. And Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 3 explains why. That He might make you know that man does not live by bread only, but by everything that proceeds out of Yahweh's mouth does man live. The test was teaching them something they could not have learned any other way, that God could be trusted with tomorrow, that His word was more reliable than bread, that dependence on Him was not weakness, but life. 40 years of daily provision, daily dependence, daily proof that the God who led them in would feed them in the wilderness. And verse 5, you shall consider in your heart that as a man disciplines his son, so Yahweh your God disciplines you. Not a judge sentencing a criminal, a father disciplining a son. The wilderness was not a prison sentence, it was a classroom, it was a forge, it was the place where a crowd of slaves became a people who knew their God. The 40 years were not wasted. Nothing God does is wasted. But here is the question that has been building the whole time. If the test is for formation, if God already knows, if the fire is for refining, then who actually passes? Is there anyone who walked through the testing and came out the other side? And the answer to that is the most important part of this whole story. Because the one who passed the test is the one you would least expect, and his passing changes everything about yours. Matthew chapter 4, verse 1. Then Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. Stop. Read the beginning of that verse again. Led up by the Spirit. The Spirit led Jesus into the testing, not the enemy, the Spirit. The same wilderness where Israel failed for 40 years, Jesus entered for 40 days. And where Israel grumbled about bread, Jesus was hungry. And the tempter came and said, turn these stones into bread. And Jesus answered with the very verse about manna. Man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. Where Israel tested God at Nasah, demanding proof that He was among them, Jesus refused to test His Father. Where Israel bowed to a golden calf, Jesus refused to worship anything but God alone. The nation failed its test in the wilderness. And the Son of God walked into the same wilderness, faced the same kind of testing, and passed, not because it was easy. The text says He was hungry, He was weak. He was in the desert for 40 days. He was tempted in every way, just like us. Hebrews chapter 4, verse 15. But one who has been in all points tempted like we are, yet without sin. And here is what that means for how you face your own testing. Hebrews chapter 2, verse 18. For in that He Himself has suffered being tempted, He is able to help those who are tempted. He is able to help those who are tempted. The one who was tested became the one who helps the tested. He did not stay at a safe distance and watch you go through the fire. He went through it Himself. The furnace that refines you, He stood in it. The wilderness that strips you, He walked it. The temptation that whispers in your ear, He heard it. And He came out the other side, not to lecture you about it, but to help you through it. Your tester became your helper. Your judge became your advocate. The one who knows what is in your heart is the one who went through the fire with a heart like yours. And that brings us to the promise that should change how you sleep at night. 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 13. No temptation has taken you except what is common to man. But God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted, above what you are able, but will with the temptation also make the way of escape, that you may be able to endure it. Read that again. God is faithful. He will not allow you to be tested above what you are able. And with the testing, He makes the way of escape, not escape from the test. Escape through it. The way out is on the other side of endurance, and the one who guarantees that is the one who was tested for you. You see this boundary in the book of Job. 2. The enemy wants to tear Job apart, and God sets the limit. Job chapter 1, verse 12. Only on himself don't put your hand. And again, Job chapter 2, verse 6. Only spare his life. The testing has a fence around it. It has a boundary. It has a limit that only God sets. And the same God who set the boundary around Job's suffering is the same God who set the boundary around yours. The fire has a temperature. The season has an end. The door has a way through. You may not see the boundary from inside the fire, but it is there. It has always been there. So let us take a breath and look at where we have been. God tests Abraham on a mountain. And the text says, "Now I know." God tests Israel in the wilderness for 40 years, and the text says, "To know what was in your heart." God leaves Hezekiah alone with the ambassadors from Babylon, and the text says, to test him, that he might know all that was in his heart. And every time, the same two words are doing the same two jobs. Nasah. To prove, to refine, to display. Yada. To know in the deepest, most relational, most intimate sense, not information. Experience, not discovery. Demonstration, not discovery. Demonstration. And now we can finally answer the question that started all of this. If God knows everything, why does He test us? Because the test is not for Him. It is for you. God does not test you to find out who you are. He tests you to reveal who you are becoming. He does not run an experiment to learn your heart. He walks you through the fire so your heart is refined, proven, and made visible. The test is not a pop quiz. It is a furnace. It is a mirror. It is a classroom. And the one who knows the answer before you begin is the one sitting with you through every step. Think about Abraham for a moment. God already knew Abraham's heart. He knew it before the command. He knew it before the mountain. He knew it before the knife. But Abraham did not know it. Not really. Not the way you know a thing, only after you have lived it. Abraham had believed God for decades. But on that mountain, with the wood stacked and the knife raised, belief became something else. It became proven. It became visible. It became the thing the angels could see, and the boy on the altar could see, and Abraham himself could see. God did not learn who Abraham was. Abraham learned who Abraham was. And the world learned what faith looks like when everything is on the line. And here is the part that should reach into your life right now. Because you are in a season. Maybe it is a closed door. Maybe it is a long silence. Maybe it is a relationship that broke, a body that failed, a dream that died, a prayer that seems to have gone nowhere, and you have asked the question, why is this happening? What am I supposed to learn? Is God even in this? And the answer the whole Bible has been building toward is this. He is not testing you to find out about you. He is testing you to bring out what is already in you. The faith you have been carrying, the trust you have been practicing, the love you have been learning, the test is what turns it from something you believe into something you are. And the God who already knows the outcome is the God who is with you in the middle of it. He is not watching from a distance. He is in it with you. The Spirit who led Jesus into the wilderness is the same Spirit who helps your weakness. Romans chapter 8, verse 26. For we don't know how to pray as we ought, but the Spirit Himself makes intercession for us with groanings which can't be uttered. You do not even have to pray the right words. The Spirit prays them for you. The one who knows everything is the one who is praying through you. The one who is testing you is the one who is holding you. The one who set the fire is the one who stands in it with you. And maybe that is the deepest thing of all. God does not test you because He needs to know. He tests you because He wants you to know. He wants you to know that your faith is real. He wants you to know that He is faithful. He wants you to know that you can endure. And He wants the people around you to know it too. Because your test is not just for you. It is for everyone watching. The way you walk through your fire becomes the proof that someone else can walk through theirs. Your endurance becomes their hope. Your faithfulness becomes their sermon. The test is not wasted. Nothing in it is wasted. Every sleepless night, every unanswered prayer, every closed door, it is all being woven into something that will outlast you. And then there is one more thing. The thing that should stay with you the longest. Because the story of Abraham does not end with the knife. It ends with a ram. Does not end with the knife. It ends with a ram. Genesis chapter 22, verse 13. Abraham looked up, and behind him was a ram caught in the thicket by its horns. And he took the ram and offered it up instead of his son. And he named that place, verse 14. Abraham called the name of that place Yahweh will provide. The Lord will provide. That is the name of the place where the test happened, not the place of the knife. The place of provision. Because the God who tests is the same God who provides. The God who asks for everything is the same God who gives everything. The God who leads you into the wilderness is the same God who feeds you with manna. The God who lets the fire rise is the same God who sits over the metal and watches. And the God who tested his servant Abraham is the same God who centuries later did not spare his own son, but gave him up for us all. The ram in the thicket pointed forward to the lamb on the cross. The provision on the mountain was a picture of the provision on Calvary. The test that Abraham walked through was pointing at the test that Jesus would walk through for you. So here is what I want you to take with you. When you are in the season, when the door is closed and the silence is long and you cannot see the way through, remember this. You are not standing in an exam room. You are standing in a furnace with a refiner who knows exactly what he is doing. You are not being watched by a God who is waiting to see if you fail. You are being held by a God who already knows you can endure because he is the one giving you the strength to endure. The test is not for his information. It is for your formation. And the one who knows everything, who knew your heart before the test began, is the one who will be with you until it is finished. And on the other side of the fire, you will not be less than you were. You will be more. Refined, proven, known. And when you look back at the mountain, you will not see the knife. You will see the ram caught in the thicket. You will see the altar. You will see the place where the God who tested you was the God who provided. And you will know his name for that place. Yahweh will provide. God bless you.